The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble fireplace, silencing the laughter of the Christmas Eve party and marking the exact moment Maya's life broke into a million jagged pieces. The sharp sound echoed through the cavernous living room of the Caldwell estate in Greenwich, a stark contrast to the festive carols playing softly in the background. Outside, a blizzard howled, battering the frosted windows with relentless fury. But inside, the air was stiflingly warm, heavy with the scent of pine and the cloying sweetness of expensive perfume. Just moments ago, Maya had been the picture of grace in her modest emerald gown, navigating the emotional minefield of her mother-in-law's holiday dinner. She had spent days preparing, hoping this year might be different. But when she proudly placed the turkey on the table, Eleanor had merely wrinkled her nose, her voice cutting through the conversation like a knife. "I suppose it's edible," Eleanor had sniffed, offering a tight, pitying smile to the guests. "Though I've always found that kind of seasoning a bit too urban for a Caldwell Christmas table." Preston, Maya's billionaire husband, had said nothing. He had simply stared into his eggnog, shrinking into his chair, a titan in the tech world, but a terrified little boy in his mother's shadow. The dinner was merely the prelude to the execution. As the staff cleared the plates, Eleanor tapped her manicured fingernails on her silver laptop, a sharp rhythmic sound that foreshadowed the calculated destruction she had planned for months. "Preston, darling," she purred, connecting her device to the massive smart TV above the fireplace. "Before we open gifts, there is a painful truth we must address." Suddenly, images flooded the screen. High-definition photos of Maya entering a motel room. A grainy video of her embracing Lucas, her business partner. The AI-generated forgeries were terrifyingly perfect, crafted to exploit Preston's deepest insecurities. Maya gasped, her hands trembling. "Preston, that's not real. That's a lie. You know Lucas is gay. You know I was at the studio late that night." Preston stood up, his face flushed with humiliated rage and too much brandy. He didn't analyze the shadows in the photos. He didn't ask his wife for the truth. He only heard his mother's voice whispering the poison she had been feeding him for years. "I told you, son," Eleanor murmured, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's tragic, really. But those people simply lack our moral fiber. It's in their nature to deceive." "Get out," Preston choked out, refusing to meet Maya's eyes. "You made a fool of me in my own house. Get out." "Preston, please look at me. Think about our family," Maya pleaded, reaching for him. But Eleanor stepped between them, a wall of cold blue silk. She snapped her fingers, and two burly security guards materialized from the hallway shadows. "Remove her," Eleanor commanded, her voice devoid of emotion. "And keep Leo and Mia upstairs. They don't need to see a stranger." "No. My babies. Leo. Mia." Maya screamed as the guards seized her arms. She fought, her heels scraping helplessly against the polished marble floor, but she was no match for them. The heavy front doors were thrown open, and the freezing wind slapped her face, stealing the breath from her lungs. She was tossed onto the snowy steps without a coat, without her purse, stripped of her dignity and her world in a single heartbeat. Shivering in the biting wind, Maya bangs on the heavy oak door, screaming her children's names, while inside, she sees Eleanor through the window, closing the velvet curtains with a satisfied smile. "That scene just broke my heart," Maya, thrown into the freezing snow on Christmas Eve while Eleanor smiles from the window. If you are still watching and you are rooting for Maya to survive and get her justice, please drop the number 8 in the comments below. Let me know you are here standing with her. And if you haven't joined our family yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black King and hit that notification bell right now so you don't miss the moment Maya fights back. Your support truly helps us continue creating these powerful stories to inform and inspire you. Now, let's see how she survives the winter. Let's continue. The sound of the judge's gavel hitting the wood echoed like a gunshot in the sterile courtroom, signaling the official death of Maya's rights as a mother. It was a massacre disguised as a legal proceeding. Eleanor's high-priced legal sharks didn't just win. They eviscerated Maya's character. Paraded before the bench were witnesses, maids and drivers from the estate who feared losing their jobs more than they feared perjury, who lied with practiced ease. They painted Maya not as the devoted mother she was, but as an unstable, absentee adulterous gold digger. When the judge granted full and sole custody to Preston, citing Maya's lack of stable housing and questionable moral judgment, Maya unconsciously rubbed her bare ring finger, the phantom weight of her wedding band replaced by a crushing emptiness. Eleanor didn't even look at her. She just adjusted her fur coat, looking bored, as if she were merely waiting for a tedious play to end. The weeks that followed blurred into a gray haze of slush and despair. The warmth of the Greenwich estate was replaced by the damp chill of a cramped, drafty studio in a rundown building in Queens. The radiator clanked like a dying engine, and the wind whistled through cracked window panes, mocking her fall from grace. Her bank accounts remained frozen, locked tight by prenup clauses triggered by the alleged infidelity. Maya had sold her last pair of diamond earrings just to pay the deposit and first month's rent, but now the cupboards were bare. Hunger was a constant, gnawing companion, but it was nothing compared to the starvation of her heart without Leo and Mia. One particularly bitter night in February, the silence became too loud. It amplified the absence of Leo's giggles and Mia's bedtime stories until the grief felt physical, like a stone in her chest. Maya opened the window and stepped out onto the rusted fire escape. The wind bit through her thin sweater. She looked down at the dark, garbage-strewn alleyway 3 stories below. The city lights looked like distant, cold stars, indifferent to her suffering. She gripped the icy railing, her knuckles turning white, leaning over the precipice. It would be so easy to just let go, to stop the noise, to stop the pain. "Honey, you look like you could use a slice of peach cobbler." The voice was raspy but warm, pulling Maya back from the edge. She froze, blinking away tears, and turned to see her neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, leaning out of the adjacent window. The elderly white woman, with silver hair set in curlers and a walker visible behind her, wasn't looking at Maya with judgment or pity. Her eyes held a knowing gentleness. "Come inside," Mrs. Higgins urged, waving a hand. "It's too cold for heartache out here, and my oven is still warm." Inside Mrs. Higgins' apartment, the air smelled of cinnamon, nutmeg, and old books. It was cluttered, filled with knickknacks and photos of grandchildren, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of the Caldwell mansion. As the older woman placed a steaming plate of homemade cobbler in front of her, Maya stiffened. She waited for the sneer, the condescension, the subtle racism she had learned to expect from older white women like Eleanor. But Mrs. Higgins just poured 2 cups of tea and patted Maya's hand with a touch as light as a feather. "Tears don't have a color, child," she said softly, pushing the fork towards Maya. "Let it out. You're safe here." Maya looked at the kind, wrinkled face, and the dam finally broke. She wept into her hands, sobbing out the agony of the last 2 months, held together only by the unexpected grace of a stranger. As Maya eats the warm pie, she spots a newspaper on the table with a photo of Preston and a new young fiancé. Maya wipes her tears, her eyes hardening. "I won't let them win. I will survive for my children." 3 years later, the rhythmic hum of a sewing machine and the smell of fresh paint had replaced the silence of despair. Maya wasn't just surviving, she was quietly building an empire. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Phoenix Interiors, her converted warehouse studio in Brooklyn. The space was alive with color. Swatches of bold Kent cloth draped over sleek, mid-century modern furniture, a fusion of her African heritage and American comfort that had taken the design world by storm. Maya moved through the studio with a clipboard, pausing to offer a warm smile and genuine praise to her junior designers, treatment she had never received from Eleanor. On her desk sat a framed photograph of Leo and Mia. They looked older in the picture, a candid shot taken from a distance during one of her supervised visits, the only time she was allowed to see them. In the background, a flat-screen TV muted on the wall flashed a news ticker, Caldwell tech stocks volatile amid leadership rumors. Preston looked haggard in the accompanying clip, a shadow of the man he used to be, but Maya didn't have time to dwell on his failures. She had built her own success, brick by brick, fueled by the promise she made in Mrs. Higgins' kitchen. The buzzing of her phone interrupted her review of a new hotel contract. It was an unknown number. Maya hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Maya," a soft, professional voice asked. "I'm calling from St. Jude's Hospice Care. We have a patient, Mr. Lucas Vance." He doesn't have much time left. He's been begging to see you. He says he can't make his peace with God until he speaks to you." The name hit her like a physical blow. Lucas, the man whose face had been plastered next to hers in those fake photos. The partner she thought had betrayed her for money. Curiosity and a strange sense of duty outweighed her anger. "I'll be there," she whispered. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fading lilies. Lucas lay in the bed, unrecognizable. The cancer had hollowed him out, leaving him gaunt and pale, a stark contrast to the vibrant man she once knew. When he saw Maya, tears leaked from his sunken eyes. "I didn't think you'd come," he wheezed. "I'm so sorry, Maya. Eleanor, she found out about my sister's heart condition. She offered to pay for the surgery. I sold you out to save my family. I was weak." Maya stood by the bed, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse. Hearing the truth that it was Eleanor's money and manipulation, not just random malice, twisted the knife in her heart, but also validated everything she had suspected. "You destroyed my life, Lucas," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I know," he coughed, reaching a shaking hand toward the bedside table. "But I kept insurance. In case she ever turned on me." He pointed to a small metal box. The original unedited photos. The recordings of her instructions. The bank transfers. It's all there. He picked up a small silver key and held it out to her. "Take it. Destroy her." Maya stands outside the hospital, the spring breeze blowing her coat. She clenches the silver key in her fist. It feels heavy like a weapon. It's time to go to war. Maya finally has the key, and it's time for war. If you are still watching and you're ready to see Eleanor face the truth, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you're still here with us. And if you haven't joined the community yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black King and turn on the bell right now. You definitely don't want to miss the courtroom showdown coming up next. Your support helps us continue creating amazing content to inform and inspire you every day. Now, let's head to court. Let's continue. The courtroom was suffocatingly silent, but the voice coming from the recorder was loud, clear, and dripping with a venom that made everyone shudder. "I won't let that black woman turn my grandchildren into them." The recording echoed off the mahogany walls of the New York Supreme Court, cutting through the humid summer air like a jagged blade. Moments before, Eleanor's legal team had been smug, effectively painting Maya as unstable and unfit. But the atmosphere had shifted instantly when Maya's lawyer stood up, holding a small USB drive retrieved from the safe deposit box, opened by the silver key Maya now clutched in her lap. "Your Honor," the lawyer had said, "we submit into evidence the final confession of Mr. Lucas Vance, authenticated by forensic specialists." On the witness stand, Eleanor's arrogant smirk faltered for the first time. The recording continued, playing the damning conversation between Eleanor and the private investigator she had hired years ago. First came the technical details, instructions on how to use deepfake technology to graft Maya's face onto another woman's body. But then came the admission that sucked the air out of the room. "Why go to such lengths, Mrs. Caldwell?" the investigator's voice asked on the tape. "Because I have to protect my son," Eleanor's recorded voice hissed, sounding both imperious and surprisingly pathetic. "My husband left me for a woman like her 30 years ago. He destroyed our family for some exotic flame. I will not let history repeat itself. I will not let a woman of that color steal my son and taint my lineage. Do whatever it takes. Destroy her." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. Reporters in the back row began furiously typing. Preston, sitting behind his mother's legal table, went rigid, his face drained of color, his hands trembling violently on the table. For years, he had believed his mother's actions were born out of protective love, misguided perhaps, but maternal. Now, the horrific truth crashed down on him. He was just a pawn in his mother's decades-old vendetta against his father. He wasn't a beloved son. He was a weapon used to settle a score with a ghost. "You lied," Preston whispered, his voice cracking in the silence that followed the tape. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "You didn't do this for me. You did this because of Dad? You destroyed my family because of your own hate." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fury, but she couldn't speak. The facade of the noble matriarch had crumbled, revealing the bitter, bigoted woman beneath. The judge banged the gavel, his face twisted in disgust. He glared at Eleanor over his spectacles. In 20 years on the bench, I have never seen such a vile, calculated manipulation of the justice system, he declared, his voice booming. Mrs. Caldwell, you are to be remanded into custody pending an immediate investigation for fraud, perjury, and evidence tampering. As for the plaintiff, he looked at Maya, his expression softening. Full custody is restored to Mrs. Maya Caldwell, effective immediately. As bailiffs move towards Eleanor, she collapses, gasping for air, her hand reaching out to Preston. But for the first time in his life, Preston turns his back on her and walks away. The Greenwich mansion was no longer a home. It was a mausoleum of secrets, collecting dust and regrets while its owner withered away in a sterile facility. The windows that had once glowed with golden light during that fateful Christmas party were now dark, staring out like hollow eyes at the overgrown lawn. The seasons had turned, mirroring the collapse of the Caldwell dynasty. The biting blizzards of winter had melted away, and the vibrant spring had passed, giving way to a melancholy autumn where dead leaves skittered across the driveway, a fitting backdrop for the end of an era. For Preston, the fall had been absolute. In the 6 months following the courtroom revelation, his life had disintegrated with terrifying speed. His company's stock tanked as investors fled the scandal, forcing the board to oust him. His trophy wife, seeing the flow of money dry up, filed for divorce before the ink on his termination papers was even dry. He was now living in a cramped, rented apartment, drowning his sorrows in cheap whiskey, too bitter and ashamed to visit the mother who had orchestrated his ruin. Eleanor Caldwell, once the queen of Greenwich society, spent her final days in a luxury nursing home, partially paralyzed by a stroke brought on by the stress of the trial. She died on a Tuesday afternoon alone. No family held her hand. Only the beep of a heart monitor accompanied her final breath. A week after the funeral, which was sparsely attended, Preston and Maya were summoned to the family lawyer's office. The room smelled of mahogany and old money, a scent that used to comfort Preston but now only made him nauseous. He sat on the edge of his chair, disheveled and desperate, eyeing Maya. She sat opposite him, composed and radiating a quiet strength, flanked by a legal representative for Leo and Mia. Preston drummed his fingers on his knee, his eyes darting to the lawyer's briefcase. He needed this inheritance. He needed a lifeline. Mrs. Caldwell left very specific instructions. The lawyer began, adjusting his glasses. He opened the heavy cream-colored envelope. To my son, Preston? Preston leaned forward, holding his breath. I leave nothing. You proved yourself weak. You allowed a lie to dismantle your life because you lacked the spine to seek the truth. You are not fit to manage the Caldwell legacy. Preston jumped up, his face turning purple. What? That's impossible. She can't do that. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer snapped. He turned to Maya. To Maya, I leave the remainder of my liquid assets and the sale proceeds of the estate, totaling approximately $47 million. The room went silent. Preston looked like he had been struck by lightning. Her? The enemy? Why her? The lawyer pulled a folded piece of stationery from the file and slid it across the desk to Maya. She wrote this before the stroke took her speech. Maya picked up the letter. The handwriting was shaky but sharp. You defeated me, it read. I spent my life hating you for what you represented, but in the end, you showed the kind of resilience I wished my son possessed. You survived the fire I set. You are the only one strong enough to hold this power. Take the money. It's blood money anyway. Do with it what you will. Maya, Preston stammered, his anger instantly replaced by pathetic begging. He reached across the desk, his eyes wet. Maya, please. I'm broke. I have debts. We were family once. She was crazy, you know that. You don't need all that money. Just give me a share. For old time's sake. Maya stares at the check. $47 million. Enough to buy anything, or to change everything. She looks at Preston, who's begging for a share, and calmly puts the check in her purse. I know exactly what to do with this. The headline on the morning news didn't talk about a scandal. It talked about the largest single donation to the Justice for Families Foundation in history. While legal analysts scrambled to understand why a single mother would give away a $47 million fortune, Maya sat in her living room, feeling lighter than she had in years. She hadn't kept a dime of Eleanor's blood money. Instead, she had turned a legacy of hate into a scholarship fund for children of falsely accused parents and a legal defense grant for mothers fighting the same bias system that had almost destroyed her. By giving it all away, she had proven the one thing Eleanor refused to believe until her dying breath. Maya was never a gold digger. She was a queen who could build her own castle. It was Thanksgiving Day, completing the circle that began on that horrific Christmas Eve 4 years ago. But this house was nothing like the cold, museum-like mausoleum in Greenwich. Maya's brownstone in Brooklyn was alive with laughter, the air thick with the savory aroma of roasted turkey, collard greens, and Mrs. Higgins' famous peach cobbler. The dining table was extended to its limit, surrounded not by stiff socialites, but by a vibrant, diverse tapestry of people who loved her loyal staff from Phoenix Interiors, the nurse who had cared for Lucas, old friends, and sitting proudly at the head of the table, Mrs. Higgins, acting as the honorary grandmother Leo and Mia deserved. A tentative knock on the front door interrupted the toast. The room quieted. Maya stood up, smoothing her dress, and walked to the entryway. Through the frosted glass, she saw a silhouette shivering in the November chill. She opened the door to find Preston standing there, clutching a cheap, wilting bouquet of carnations. He looked broken, his coat threadbare, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. He gazed past her into the golden warmth of the hallway, hearing the laughter of his children, a sound he hadn't earned the right to hear. "Maya," he rasped, holding out the flowers. I miss them. I miss us. I can change. I know I was weak, but I'm their father. Doesn't that count for something?" Maya looked at him, not with anger, but with a distant pity. He was a ghost haunting a life he had voluntarily abandoned. "You chose a lie over your children because it was easier than standing up to your mother," she said softly, her voice steady. "That was a choice, Preston. We have healed. We have built a home based on truth and love. You are still broken, and you cannot bring that brokenness in here. But I have nowhere else to go." Preston cried, taking a step forward as if to push his way in. "I'm family." "No," Maya said firmly. She didn't have to push him back. Behind her, footsteps approached. Mrs. Higgins appeared, leaning on her walker, followed by two of Maya's designers and the nurse. They stood shoulder to shoulder behind Maya, a silent, impenetrable wall of community support. They were her village. They were her shield. Preston froze, looking at the united front of people who had picked up the pieces he had shattered. He realized with a crushing finality that he was truly the outsider now. Shoulders slumped, he turned around and retreated into the dark, cold night. Maya closes the door on the cold night, turning back to the warmth of her home. Mrs. Higgins passes her a plate of turkey. "Eat up, sweetheart," she says. Maya smiles. She didn't need the billions. She had everything she ever wanted right here.